Something that pushed me was when I had a conversation with a taxi uncle. If you only have 10 years and you have to find a role, what is that role?
Biopsychologists are akin to career advisors.
Welcome to All About Psych, the flagship podcast of the Singapore Psychological Society Youth Wing. All About Psych is your go-to resource for all things psychology as told by current students. Each episode, we invite speakers from the psychology field, fellow students, and/or relevant professional guests to discuss various issues related to psychology. Without further ado, let's hand it over to our host for this episode.
Right, welcome back to another episode of All About Psych. So we're here on our 4th episode now, and if you've been tuning in from our previous episodes, we've just concluded a series on various universities and what kind of opportunities they offer for all of you aspiring psychologists out there. So today, we're gonna hop onto another mini sort of topic at hand, and it's exploring different psychological industries. And today we have our very well esteemed guest, Miss Cherie Tang, who is an industrial organizational psychology. So today we'll be holding space to kind of debunk a bit of the myths around industrial organizational psychology, and pretty much find out more about the industry. Yeah. So first, I welcome our special guest over here, and I'll just give you the time to maybe introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jebs. So my name is Cherie Tang, and I'm actually working with NG Southeast Asia Private Limited. So we are a renewables company, and I work there as a regional lead for learning and organization development.
All right, that's so nice. Cool. So maybe in addition to your role, could you just give us a brief on what your day-to-day job scope is like?
So my day-to-day job is going into meetings with various stakeholders in the organization from all levels. So whether it's the most junior person all the way up to the most senior person.
Mm-hmm.
And I work in the space of human resource, and I specialize in team development and also organizational development. So what that means is that in my day-to-day job, I actually consult with different business stakeholders to understand what are their gaps in training and helping each of the individuals grow themselves into a better version for them to be more productive in the organization. So it's trying to uncover that little gap that they might have, which could be known to them or could be unknown to them, because it's something that they may not have truly reflected and had time to think about. The other area and scope that I work on is actually the facilitation part. So I actually do a lot of workshop facilitations within the organization itself. So I run new leaders assimilation program, which helps leaders be able to assimilate faster in the teams that they have acquired. So some of these could be new managers in the organization, and they are taking on new teams which could be unknown to them or known to them. So we just want to make sure that the communication within the teams itself is seamless, and they're able to identify what are the goals of their managers and to fly together with them.
Right.
Yes.
So really inspiring words. And I think I'm happy to see companies such as the one that you're part of, take on this role of helping their employees kind of blossom with them. Yeah. So I'll move on to the next question. So just wanted to figure out what actually motivated you to study or pursue IO psychology.
So I started off as a real estate graduate. So I had no experience in HR, and then I actually spent 2 weeks of my time after I graduated from school to actually find out what exactly that I truly enjoyed, because I knew 100% or even 200% that I never wanted to go back into real estate. So I was literally left with no choice. But it's also, if I look on it in hindsight, it means that the world's my oyster. I could have gone into anything, and I could pursue anything that I wanted. So during that 2 weeks, I actually went to consult different people. So I talked to my father, who was an academia. I spoke with my aunties who were in real estate. Unfortunately, my whole family was in real estate. So,
For your father, right?
Yeah, correct. So it was very helpful because I could understand what they actually went through and whether it was something that I wanted. But ultimately, it was a real true reflection of myself, understanding where I came from and what were the things that I enjoyed doing. So for me, I enjoyed talking to people. I enjoyed understanding people. And it was also something that pushed me was when I had a conversation with a taxi uncle. So going on a taxi one day during my 2 weeks, and then I was trying to understand, at the back of my mind, I was just thinking about what I really want to achieve for the rest of my life in my career. Then he was there talking about his life and how he actually stopped working at 40 and became a taxi driver because he felt he was really tired of corporate and he was grumbling a lot. And I asked myself at 40, do I want to be a person with 15 years of experience or even 17 years of experience and being like him, complaining about my job, but yet I'm not able to move because I already acquired 10 years of experience, right? And there's nowhere else to go. And was I willing to restart from scratch, taking a graduate pay and fighting with other people who are new graduates from the universities? So that actually inspired and spurred me to tell myself, nope, I want to go into HR. Let's just try. And then I started applying everywhere. So like a headless fly, I just kept sending out. And then I realized that, oh no, I don't have the certifications, the right certifications to get into human resource. So what could I do next? And that's what inspired me to take a master's in IO psychology because it came with a HRM.
Right.
Yes.
So it's like an all-in-one kind of thing.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think it's really cool that, out of anyone that's out there, like, got inspired by Taxi Uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. Anywhere you can get inspiration.
I think that's very inspiring to hear.
Yes.
So, I mean, just curious on that point, because I feel like he kind of inspired you to think broader, but is there anyone in your life who inspired you to focus like on HR?
I think it would also be the conversations that I had with my aunties and uncles and also with my mother as well, because my mom is my biggest supporter. So she saw me grow up. She knows what are my strengths and my weaknesses. So during that time when I actually consulted and I asked them, she said, if you're really good at talking to people, why not try human resource? And not to forget that 15 years back, the market was pretty limited with the things that you can do. So human resource was one of the more stable jobs. I mean, apart from then government sector. So I actually looked and I was like, okay, yeah, it seems like something that seems fun. Let me just try going into it.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's quite nice to hear.
Yes.
So I just want to know, like, so you were kind of alluding to it on like your master's in IO psychology, right? So I just want to know what it's like maybe doing your master's program.
So I did a part-time distance learning for IO psychology, taking on a US curriculum instead of a UK curriculum. So most of our curriculum throughout our studies in Singapore has always been UK. And I thought it might be fun for us to take something different because it gives you a different perspective. And US has always been known to be a more application-based learning style, which is very different from most of our education system in Singapore. So I thought, why not? Since I've already done 10 over years of education in Singapore, which is on a UK-based system. Why not try something different? And the main thing was I didn't have to write a dissertation.
Right.
Yeah, I really didn't like writing research papers then. So I told myself, why not try a US-based system, which was full course-based.
Right.
Yeah, so how the program was actually run was that we actually had our lecturers fly down from US for a class of 10 to 15 of us.
Oh wow.
And then we
intimate
actually,
class.
yeah, it's a pretty big class.
Oh.
And we had, I think, up to 8 runs or 8 batches of IO psychologists before they decided to close that program.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. So during that program itself, we had about 8 different modules, which range from assessment tools, research. We still did research, but it was a minor research paper. And all the way up to leadership itself. Yeah, like people development, how do you utilize assessment tools in recruitment. So it was pretty much very workplace-based and very focused on what are some of the topics ranging in IO psychology with human resource.
I see.
Yes. So for that 9 months, I was really focused on studying what is IO psychology and the applications of it in human resource.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
so we had project works, we had a lot of discussions, and we also covered a segment on coaching as well.
Oh, cool. So would you say like this is, I'm just trying to understand, like through all of that you said, right? Like, is this like what to expect as an IO psychology, or is this like something that you feel like you kind of have to take on as you become an IO psychologist in like a HR field?
I would say that the course of study in IO psychology is not something that is commonly used in Singapore's context, partially because there are very few IO psychologists or people who continue pursuing the module itself. And in most of the organizations, you don't really see a lot of IO psychologists because they don't see a need for it. Yeah, but I have seen very successful companies. So like your ExxonMobil, your 3M, they actually have very low hire rates, very, very low. So it's difficult to get in because they have a very robust assessment tool and IO team to create those assessment tools for recruitment. Yes. So in terms of application, I think those are the few very successful companies that have utilized IO and actually understand the importance of having an IO psychology. But with those comes price, right? Cost to the organization.
Fair.
So is the company or organizations open to absorb these costs, operational costs, into their P&L?
Right.
And I think most of the answer is no. So IO becomes a good to have in most organizations, but not a necessity. Yes. But that doesn't deter the fact that just because it isn't popular, it's not a good addition. So in comparison to many organizations that I've been, I feel that with an IO psychology or IO psychologist within the organization, it adds a different data point and it also provides a different perspective and purview as to how can we interact with our staff and how can we motivate them. Because in human resource, when you study the module or the degree itself, you'll realize that it touches a little bit, but not really in depth on the psychology part of people. And I feel that that is actually a gap because you feel that you kind of end up having people or HR managers who are less empathetic towards the situations of their staff. Yeah, so with the IO psychology one, we actually help with better recruitments, and then people feel like they're having a better development as well, because you can really go down to diagnose what are the problems and where are the gaps that they probably might have, and then also looking at the overall organization itself and diagnose those big cultural and value systems which might be lacking in the organization.
I see. Okay. Well, I mean, that's quite really insightful to share. Just want to find out a bit more actually. Like, I think you've been saying like a lot of things like, diagnosing problems or like handling like worker relations and stuff like that. So, and you also mentioned that with your IO masters, it's adjacent or there's an additional module on HR, is there?
Yes. No, it's actually not really with a HR. So they embed the HR terminologies and also the topics within the modules itself.
Ah, I see. So
Yes.
that was more like exposure rather
Yes.
than teaching you how to become a HR.
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, my question to you would be like, I guess from your experience, both from your master's program and also like being in the industry for so long, like, could you maybe share like where IO psychologists lie in this whole like HR network? So what does a high IO psychologist actually do in this team, and how different is this from like your other HR workers?
So IO psychology itself, it actually embeds very well with the HRM itself. So we actually break out the diagnostic part. So we actually learn about how do we diagnose the issues and problems within the organization. So when you have somebody who is trained in IO and a human resource person, they are able to diagnose further and to ask the right questions, because IO psychology teaches you very much about how do you ask good questions. And how do you find out, or using words and observing people's expression? Because after all, it's a psychology module itself. So we look a lot on observing people's behavior, observing how their expression is, their body language. And also when you ask certain questions, you can see a glimmer of brightness, a sparkle in their eye. So those actually help you diagnose better where exactly are some of the gaps. So we see it in recruitment, because sometimes when you realize that you nail it, the interviewee itself could likely be articulating more in comparison, especially when you have nailed those comments or those contents that you're looking for. Yeah. And also with IO psychology, it actually delves under a different perspective, where you look at values of a person, the culture, and you also do the analysis work of what exactly is this person or lacking in. So I would say that IO is very much integrated within human resource management itself. But again, not many people realize that it's actually part of psychology.
Right.
Yes.
So just for my clarification, like it is like really well integrated into like the HR management team, but it's just a different aspect of HR that people don't really associate with, like the whole psychology part of it.
Yes.
And I think just to follow up, like some interesting things that I heard you say was like understanding the gaps of your workers. So my understanding of that is like they're already employed and you're there to kind of meet any of the gaps that they're lacking in. But I think you also mentioned something about interview period. So does IO psychology also play a role like during recruitment?
Yes. So during recruitment itself, IO psychologists actually utilize assessment tools. So assessment tools is a little bit like your psychological assessment list, right? You assess how the person is based on the responses that they get. So the assessment tool becomes a data point for most IO psychologists to be able to diagnose where exactly are their strengths and their weaknesses. Because each person, when you're working in the workplace, you definitely have some level of gaps. So whether it is you might be a bit lazy on a normal day, or you get demotivated when you keep doing a certain task. So for some people, they may require a variety of work when they are working. And then if you keep giving them the same monotonous task, they will end up getting demotivated and want to leave. And how do you actually see that? When you see them posting a lot on LinkedIn.
Right.
Yeah, searching very often, putting their LinkedIn as they're open to find work. Yeah, so we want to avoid that, because we believe that each employee is a good worker and we employed them for a reason. So we want to keep that skill. We want to keep them in the organization, but we want to grow them so that they can learn different skills. And it's also another area where currently the government is looking into, is to upskill people, because there are certain roles which are very administrative and they may not add additional value. So when they don't add additional value to the organization, their salaries remain stagnant. So we want to make sure that we are able to justify paying people for a higher premium by moving them up to a different level so that they can contribute more meaningfully to the organization. Yes. So it's used in recruitment. So assessment tools are used in recruitment, and we also use them for development as well, because after they come into the organization, they could still maintain some gaps or some developmental areas. So we look at trying to cover those important developmental areas. So for example, let's say we have somebody who is in compensation and benefits, but he or she is not good at being meticulous. So what happens? They may add additional 0 to your salary. They may reduce 1 0 for your salary, right? And that becomes a problem. So in order for this person who is in a com and ben associate or role, they need to be meticulous. So we look at how can we make this person more meticulous, more careful, or more data driven.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. So I mean, thanks for sharing. And I think just as a summary, right, like from what I'm understanding, like an IO psychologist is really like a pre, during, post kind of thing. So I mean, I'm hearing stuff like you're helping during recruitment, you're helping like when they're here to help them in some gaps that they have, and you're even helping them for the future, like to discover and upskill them in case like they require as such to deal with like stagnation in salaries and stuff.
Yes.
All right, so cool. Like I think it's a really cool insight towards IO psychology that I think even I myself haven't really been seeing a lot. Just to flip this question in your head, like, and to ask about your experience, is there any like challenges that you faced during your time as an IO psych?
There's a lot. So when I was studying, I think trying to balance the work life as well as your studying period was also tough because a lot of our education or the master's program was after work. And I think the other challenges that we had during the study period was really trying to contribute effectively in the class. So most of my classmates were really C-suites. So they went there to really understand how can they contribute further in the human resource space, and also to have bigger visibility about what is human resource, because most of them, they come from P&L, so they manage a department, or they manage a business.
Sorry, what is P&L?
Profit and loss. Yeah, so they have they have to make sure that the money makes sense, or they look at operational costs. So they wanted to understand from their perspective as a business person, business owner, or as a CEO of the team, what is human resource? Yeah, and having to contribute as a very junior staff there when I took my master's, having to contribute and think at their perspective was very difficult, because what experiences I had was really with more operational needs. So that was during the study period. So now when I'm working in my role, I think trying to push for a lot of IO psychology research is a challenge. So pushing for assessment tools to be rolled out in organizations because it increases higher is a challenge. I've tried it for 15 years. It's really hard. And I think very few companies see the value of it because they feel that with structured interviews is more than enough. But even with structured interviews, we're still seeing a high rate of people rejecting roles and probably not even performing in their roles. So we were trying to now, in my current organization, trying to close that gaps where we find people with the right culture, with the right values, with the right attitude in the organization. Yes, so I would say that that's the application part. But there's also frustrations in challenges in my role, especially when you have people who do not accept the change management. So every change or every gap that you see is for the person after reflection to accept and move on. So that's a change. So people don't accept change easily because it means changing something about them. Yeah, and it's always tough because when you have to change a segment of yourself, it feels uncomfortable and it feels unnatural. So change management is something that is very challenging within organizations itself, and also for people to accept those changes. And because they need to embed their own values as to why it's important for me to change. And for them, in their perspective, they may not necessarily see that change is important. Yes.
Right. I think, especially what you said, like what you just said, I think really that speaks to the quality of, IO psychologists, and like, as you said before, it's a branch of psychology that you really need this patience and to really be there for them, to really even believe in them that they can change, because like they may give up on it, but I think you as an IO psychologist provide the pillar for them to motivate them to change, right?
Yes, correct.
Cool. And I think in addition to that, I'm hearing like a lot of really real challenges that you're facing. Like, to me, like, it sounds like it all goes down back to the bottom line. And I really admire like that you're fighting for all of this like softer, like more meaningful changes against like the against like the bottom line that's always just looming all over us, and that's what's resistant to everything. So I mean, maybe in your experience, in your like 15 years, is it, of working, like, have you seen any change happening?
So when I first started out, probably about 7 to 8 years, I did run a workshop on leadership. So we were targeting on new managers who were in the organization. So during that time, I specifically had one attendee. His report actually spoke to me. He said, "Can you please do something about my manager? He is very micromanager and he cannot hands off on anything." And the thing is that when I tried to understand from the manager's perspective, I realized that he was an over anxious, overthinker, and over worry. Yeah. So I think it probably sounds very common for most of us because we get a bit worried. Okay, what's this going to happen if I don't keep control on things?
And it really sounds like these are things that, if you don't actually like sit down and ask the questions, like you wouldn't even know, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't know. Yeah, but he was known by many of his peers as somebody who is very high strung, always often worry about his how things are going to be. So he became a person who was overly controlling on his team, and that felt very suffocating for his team because they felt like, I'm not able to do my job properly because you just want to put your hands into all the pies. And it also made him overwork because he was so focused on trying to make sure that all the operational needs are covered, but he forgot about him being a leader. He needs to be more strategic. So during the session itself, I think when we ran through the assessments, we went through the leadership simulations, that's when he actually truly understood that, hey, he was infringing too much.
I see.
And then when the whole session ended, almost nearly the next day, I spoke with his staff again, and his staff actually thanked me and said, you know what? My manager had a 180-degree change.
Wow, in one day?
In one day. Because he realized it clicked during the leadership simulation that he realized that, hey, he was actually overreaching and overbroaching on his team, and he was micromanaging his team too much, and it came across to his team that he wasn't trusting them at all to be able to do their job. Right? So to them, it felt like, you're not putting your trust in me that I'm a smart person and I can work.
Right.
So after the whole session, when he went back, he actually stopped trying to manage them in a micromanager manner where he keep checking in with them all the time or getting himself involved in the operational needs. In fact, he gave them the empowerment, the leeway to be able to run and produce the results. And he totally stopped doing what he was doing because he realized that from feedbacks that he was too high strung. Yeah.
Wow, that's really, really impressive actually.
Yes.
Maybe in terms of like for example, the changes that you're pushing for, like, promoting more assessment tools or like supporting research, like how have you seen that change over the past 15 years?
I would say that the push for assessment tools has become more fervent in the last 15 years. There's more utilization in comparison to the past. And I would say that a lot of companies have started to embrace using more assessment tools because they realize that assessment tools actually help people to understand themselves. It's also a good self-reflection for teams to be able to understand where their gaps are in a more safe social team setting, and also a good common language for different teams to better understand themselves. And it could be very simple tools from DISC all the way to very complex tools like Workplace Big Five. Yeah. So most teams utilize, I would say, trait tools to better understand what are some of the various traits that they might have, and that could be a gap or could be a developmental area because some people might be skewed more towards the extreme.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So most of these tools have been very helpful to help teams better understand each other and also work closely with each other, because now they have a data point to be able to talk about it and really offer open feedback. To be able to say, hey, I see this very often. And then they're like, oh yeah, is it really true? And then when they talk it out, they realize that, yeah, it's a aha moment because they didn't realize that they've been doing it a lot.
Right.
And with more self-awareness, people will have a better, will be able to control those gaps and probably weaknesses that they might have. Yes.
Wow. So, I mean, really cool. Like I hear like, in my head now, like now I'm thinking of IO psychology as someone who's really there to uncover all the things that people are too afraid to uncover in the organization. And I think the organization is just better off for it, right?
Yes, that's true.
Cool. So now we're gonna move on to a very special segment that we have today that hopefully we'll be incorporating in the future as well. So as you know the old saying, for those of you who are older listeners, you will know of the very famous saying, who you gonna call? Ghostbusters, right? If you don't know that, then I'm sorry, but we're gonna do maybe a Gen Z version of Ghostbusters because I am young enough to that's not my generation. So we're gonna do Mythbusters, and we're gonna be busting some myths now because I think myths are like the 21st century version of the ghosts that we have to bust, right? So, I have actually a list of things that I think common misconceptions that we've kind of researched on and that we've got feedback on, and just want to like get the perspective of an IO psychologist to see whether they're true or not, right?
Sure.
All right, so you ready?
Yes.
All right, so myth number 1. Do you need a postgraduate degree to be an IO psychologist?
No.
No. That's wrong. So maybe you could like outline like what actually the requirements to be an IO psychologist would be.
So I think for IO psychologists itself, you can go through a degree program, or you can actually get a master's if you're like me. If you have gotten a bachelor degree that is not of a IO psychology. But I think in most industries itself, most of us actually understand or have experienced some level of IO psychology. It's just that we are not aware of it, and it's things that we actually use. So like if you are coaching, you're consulting people, actually you're already using some level of IO psychology tools in most of your work already.
Okay. All right. So second one, IO psychologists only work in corporate environments. No, that's not right.
No, that's not right. So you would have also seen some IO psychologists who are working in Air Force and Army. So Army hires a lot of IO psychologists because they need to understand how to encourage and motivate their men to be able to go out to fight. Apart from this, you also have people who are in research in different assessment tool companies, assessment centers, and even people who are in C-suites that could be also IO psychology based.
Okay, cool. So maybe next one, IO psychologists only work in HR department. No, that's not true
No.
either.
So I have classmates who are IO psychology, but they're not working in HR. So they could be business owners. I've seen classmates who are business owners and actually attend who are actually IO psychologists. I've seen facilitators who are IO psychologists as well. I've seen academia who also are in IO psychologists as well. So not necessarily in HR. And some of them who are business leads, they are not actually HR people.
Right. Okay, I mean that sounds like, beyond like doing an IO psychologist hired job, right? Like it seems like IO psychologists can also help like other people in their endeavors, like for business owners and for even like as you said, coaching skills for facilitation.
Yes.
Oh, it's really cool. Let's see that. For the next one, is academic results the most important thing when considering an IO psychology career?
No, it's not. So actually in IO psychology, a lot of our work is based off how well you work in a workspace or in a workplace. You could be somebody who's a tool, but you're great at practical work, or you're very great at applying the IO psychology theories and terminologies, or even the learnings. You could be an effective and great HR person or even an IO psychologist because you're able to apply. So IO psychology fall under one of the more application-based psychology in the whole, I think most, in the whole group of psychology itself. We're the most applicable ones to workplace.
Oh, wow. In what ways would you be applicable to the workplace? Just maybe to elaborate on that.
Yeah. So most of our learning is because IO psychology focuses on people, organization, effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the concepts and theories and models actually focuses really on what are the workplace needs. So it could touch on things like leadership. It could touch on people behavior. It could also touch on things like why do we do what we do? And how do you encourage somebody to pursue their passion?
Right.
Yes. So it's a skill that you learn on how you can encourage people in the organization,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes there are people who are struggling really hard because financially they need to put food on the table.
Right. Yeah.
Right? But do they truly enjoy what they do? They may not.
Mm.
So recently I had a career conversation with a colleague, and I was asking her because they were considering really hard about their career change and whether they wanted to continue working on their career in corporate. So I asked her this question, which could be applicable to you listeners. If you have only left with 10 years in your life, what is the one career or passion that you think you want to pursue in that 10 years? So it could be something that's applicable to you for even new young listeners, for you all to think about, because if you only have 10 years and you have to find a role, what is that role? And if you could not be paid for a job, right, there's no money on the table, what's the passion or the work that you're willing to do? Sleeping is not included, by the way.
Right.
Yes. So I think it's something that we all have to think about. Yeah. So if you ask me, that's the applicability of IO Psych. It's really getting people to change their mindset, change their thinking about what they can achieve and what they can do with their life, because we only have a very short life of 80 years. What can you do to make a difference?
All right. I think I have one more myth
Yes.
that we'll just go through.
Sure.
IO psychologists are akin to career advisors. Oh, okay.
So in IO psychology, we learn a lot about careers and we learn a lot about motivations, but it's also because of what we learn, we have a better idea about what are the various careers out there in the market, because we work a lot on workplace. So there's a need or push for us to understand what are some of the HR trends, what are some of the careers, and what are the advisory that we can give to people. But again, it's based off what people want to do. I won't say that IO psychologists are all career advisors. We are not. Some people have different strengths. Some people are good at diagnosing in IO psychology. Some people are better in utilizing some of those concepts to be able to present better, to sell in that sense. But all in all, we do have a very strong push towards helping people to diagnose what their career direction is. And if you want to understand your careers better, you can look at Harrison Assessment. That's one of the assessments that we use in order for people to better understand what their career is.
Right. We'll put a link in that below for all of you listeners out there. All right. So thanks for sharing. And I think we've seen a lot of wrong myths out there, which I think is really a testament to, I think, a lot of stereotypes, harmful stereotypes even around the industries that I hope today we've managed to get a chance to debunk.
Thank you.
Right. So maybe just to close off, do you have any advice or parting words you have for our listeners?
I would say live your life as a legacy. Think of it. What are the legacies that you're putting out? This was actually a leaf that I took out of Jeannie Chua. So she used to be one of the group CEOs for CapitaLand, and I was very humbled to be part of her session when she was sharing on her CEO journey. She asked us to live a life with a legacy, because we only have a very short time. And what can we do in our life to impact others and to help people grow? So that has always been my mantra. And I think it's also something that our listeners can take away from, and they probably can think further in their life. What do they want?
Right.
Yes.
I think that's really nice words for our listeners over here.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you.
And yeah, so thank you all for joining us in this episode of All About Psych. So we hope this episode on career progression in IO psychology has been very insightful and has kind of debunked some of the myths that some of y'all may have. And if you're interested in hearing any more perspectives, maybe more perspectives about IO psychology or maybe other industries, do let us know. And stay tuned for next episode. So there's plenty more to come where that comes from. Okay, so goodbye.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to All About Psych. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, do consider dropping us a follow on our official Instagram and TikTok at SPS Youth Wing, where you can find weekly posts about topics in psychology as well as more information about our upcoming events. Or, if you have any questions or business inquiries related to the podcast, please reach out to us at our email yw-publicity@singaporepsychologicalsociety.com. See you in our next episode.